I made my girlfriend quit her job, change her clothes, cut off her friends, and ask me permission to breathe. Then I cheated on her and cried when she walked out. When I tried to win her back at a party, she smiled and said, "They know everything now." I left without a word. That was a year ago. Today, she spoke on stage about surviving me, and the whole room clapped. I was 5 years old when my mom died from stage 4 chest cancer, so my dad did everything he could to compensate for the trauma it brought me, including spoiling me. Back when we were still living in Turkey and I was 11 years old, I randomly decided that I wanted to own every action figure from my favorite anime. It must have been almost $900 worth of action figures. Naturally, it raised alarm bells at the border check, and instead of my dad just giving up, he paid a pediatric psychologist $1,000 to sign a letter saying the figurines were part of my grief recovery treatment. By the end of the first week, I was already sick of them and threw them out. Or for my 14th birthday, I asked my dad to turn a wing of the local museum into a permanent exhibit of my life. And on the day, I didn't even show up because I felt too tired. So by the time I graduated from high school, I turned out to be exactly how you'd expect. Spoiled, entitled, borderline narcissistic. And that's when I got my first girlfriend, Dee. To this day, I still don't know why Dee chose to be with me. She was the most loving and caring person I've ever met in my life, but nothing she did was good enough for me. On our second date, she surprised me with my favorite Turkish meal that she'd cooked from scratch. It had taken her 5 hours and tasted amazing. But instead of giving her a hug, or even just thanking her, I pushed the plate away from me. "The spices are wrong," I said, before storming out of her dorm and leaving her to clean up. From there, she tried to make it up to me by planning us a surprise weekend getaway to a luxury cabin, which she spent nearly 6 months worth of savings on. It was rustic, but modern, very beautiful, except there was one thing missing. It wasn't on the beach. So while I sulked and reminded her how useless she was, she spent the entire first day trying and failing to find alternative accommodations. And that night, I could hear her muffled crying in the bathroom. Well, I thought to myself, that's what she gets for being a crappy GF. And before you guys say anything, I hate myself for how I acted too. But unfortunately, my BS didn't stop there, because I wasn't just a spoiled little gremlin. I was insecure too. So when she got a really solid job at a local coffee shop, I wanted her to quit, because all I could think about were her male coworkers, how they probably liked what they saw, how they wanted what was mine. It drove me so insane that I started showing up completely unannounced and sat there until her shift was over, pretending to work on my laptop. And if I caught so much as a lingering stare or an overly friendly smile, I'd cause a scene. She quit after 3 weeks and chose to go into more student debt instead of upsetting me. I made it up to her though, by offering to share Spotify accounts so she wouldn't have to pay for premium anymore. But of course, I had an ulterior motive. Whenever I saw her listening to anything involving SX or cussing, I'd screenshot it. My future wife wouldn't listen to this, I'd say. It wasn't long before she would go to me for every decision she ever made. What she could wear, who she was allowed to see, where she was allowed to go. Every emotional abuser's wet dream. Well, almost. Because even that wasn't good enough for me. I saw the light from her eyes had gone, and she was practically crying every day. She just wasn't the same girl I had fallen in love with. And that's when I began to strike up a friendship with a girl I worked with. We will call the new girl Vanessa. Vanessa was the life of the party, wild and beautiful. But the moment it escalated was when we went to the movies together. There was nobody in the theater but us. We had a moment where our knees brushed against each other. From this time on, we engaged in that teenage cat and mouse game of touching each other by accident. V and I continued this charade for a few days and tried to act like we didn't have feelings for each other. Then finally, when we were closing up the shop together, it happened. I still remember how her curves felt under my hands. But cheaters' intimacy is like the fent of making love. It feels fantastic while you're doing it. But once the rush wears off, you're lower than you've ever been. So when I went home, all I wanted was to be comforted by Dee. So I called her, and we had the most passionate cuddling session of our relationship. It was the first time I actually started to appreciate her, but she didn't feel the same way. Because even though Dee was naive, she wasn't dumb. "Is that the black opium scent?" She sniffed my neck. My heart started pounding. She then proceeded to pull down my t-shirt and reveal the dozens of hickeys that marked my skin. For the first time ever, I actually felt bad about myself. When I tried to go near her, she pushed me off and walked out. And don't get me wrong, I was upset, but mostly, I was shocked. 19-year-old me couldn't fathom someone actually leaving. Someone actually saying no to me. And I didn't know it at the time, but Dee was going to do a lot more than just leave. She was going to teach me what my father never did, that I wasn't immune to consequences. I went home to my empty apartment, the silence suddenly oppressive, and did what any mature adult would do. I got completely wasted and sent Vanessa a bunch of texts about how much I missed her body. Real classy stuff. The bourbon burned my throat as I typed increasingly explicit messages, each one more desperate than the last. Vanessa came over, we hooked up again, and for a few hours, I forgot about Dee. The familiar warmth of another body next to mine was enough to temporarily fill the void. The next morning, Vanessa was gone, and I had a pounding headache and about 15 missed calls from my dad. The sunlight streaming through my blinds felt like needles in my eyes. Apparently, I drank-dialed him at 3 a.m. and rambled about how Dee had left me. He was worried. I called him back and downplayed the whole thing, told him it was just a little fight, and we'd work it out. "Son, maybe this is a good opportunity for some self-reflection," he said. I nearly laughed out loud. My dad suggesting self-reflection? The man who taught me that any problem could be solved by throwing money at it? Rich. Coming from the guy who bought me a car when I failed my freshman year classes, instead of making me face consequences. 2 weeks went by, still no word from D. The campus seemed smaller somehow, like I was constantly on the verge of running into her but never actually did. I heard through the campus grapevine that she'd moved out of her dorm and into an off-campus apartment with 3 other girls. 2 of them were girls I used to make fun of to D. One for her weight, one for her basic fashion sense. The third was a quiet art major who always looked at me like she could see right through me. The fact that she'd choose to live with them over coming back to me felt like a slap in the face, a deliberate choice to surround herself with people I'd dismissed. I tried to distract myself with Vanessa, but she was starting to get clingy. She wanted to know if we were officially dating now. I told her I needed time to process my breakup. In reality, I was still convinced D would come back eventually. Vanessa seemed okay with waiting, but I could tell she was getting impatient. She'd leave little things at my apartment: a toothbrush, a hair tie, a novel she was reading, small anchors trying to secure her place in my life. One night, I was scrolling through Instagram when I saw a post from one of D's new roommates. It was a picture of all of them at what looked like a party in their apartment. D was in the center, smiling wider than I'd seen her smile in months. Her eyes had a sparkle I hadn't seen in a long time, maybe ever. She was wearing a crop top, something I never would have allowed when we were together. The caption read, "Freedom looks good on you, girl. New beginnings." I felt sick to my stomach, not because I missed her, but because she looked happy without me, happier than she'd been with me. It didn't compute in my selfish brain. I stared at that photo for what felt like hours, zooming in on her face, looking for signs that this was all an act. There were none. The knot in my stomach tightened. I decided I needed to see her in person, make her remember what she was missing. So I found out through a mutual friend when their next apartment party was happening, and showed up uninvited. I spent an hour getting ready, wearing the shirt she always said brought out my eyes, using the cologne she used to love. The look on everyone's face when I walked in was priceless. The music didn't stop, but the energy in the room definitely shifted. People were whispering, giving me side eyes. A few conversations halted mid-sentence. I pretended not to notice, and grabbed a beer from the kitchen like I belonged there, popping the cap off with the edge of the counter, like I'd done 100 times before. I spotted D across the room, laughing with some guy I'd never seen before. He was tall, with glasses and a stupid beanie, the kind of guy I would have called a hipster loser. She hadn't noticed me yet. I made my way over, trying to look casual, weaving through the crowd that seemed to part before me like I was carrying something contagious. When she finally saw me, her smile dropped for a split second before she composed herself. She didn't look angry or upset. She looked indifferent, like I was just some random party guest she had no history with. That indifference stung worse than anger would have. "Hey," I said, trying to sound cool and detached. "Nice place." I gestured vaguely at the apartment, which was decorated with string lights and vintage posters. Things D had always wanted for our place, but I'd vetoed. D just nodded. "Thanks. I'm gonna go check on something in the kitchen," and she walked away. Just like that. No drama, no tears. She just removed herself from my presence like I was a minor inconvenience, like a telemarketer call during dinner. I followed her, of course, cornered her in the hallway leading to the bedrooms. The music was muffled here, the bass still thumping through the walls. "Can we talk?" I asked. "Privately?" I tried to make my voice gentle, the way I did when I wanted to manipulate her into forgiving me. D looked me straight in the eye. Her gaze was steady, unflinching. "You can talk to my friends now. They know everything." My blood ran cold. "What do you mean, everything?" "Everything," she repeated. "Every screenshot, every controlling text, every time you made me cry. They know it all." Her voice was calm, matter of fact, like she was discussing the weather rather than exposing my darkest behaviors. Before I could respond, one of her roommates appeared beside her, the art major, with her knowing eyes. "Everything okay here, D?" she asked, giving me a look that could curdle milk. "Everything's fine," D said calmly. He was just leaving, and somehow, I did. I left. I walked out of that apartment feeling like I'd been punched in the gut. Not because I'd lost D. I was still too self-centered to really care about that, but because people knew my carefully crafted image was at risk. The cool, confident guy everyone wanted to be around was being exposed as something much uglier. The next day, things got worse. Someone had posted an anonymous thread on the university's subreddit. The title was, "Dating a Narcissist, My 2-Year Nightmare." I clicked on it out of morbid curiosity and felt my stomach drop as I read, my coffee going cold beside me. The post detailed a relationship with a controlling, manipulative boyfriend. It talked about how he monitored her Spotify, made her quit her job, criticized everything she did, and cheated on her. There were no names mentioned, but there were enough specific details that anyone who knew us would recognize it was about me and D. The post described how he'd check her location constantly, how he'd make jokes about her weight that weren't really jokes, how he'd isolate her from friends who weren't good enough. The post went viral within our university community. People were commenting left and right, sharing their own stories of toxic relationships, offering support to the anonymous poster. Someone even linked to resources about emotional abuse. The comment section was a flood of support for her and condemnation for the unnamed boyfriend. Each new notification felt like another nail in my coffin. I panicked. I created a throwaway account and commented, trying to defend the boyfriend in the story. I said there were 2 sides to every story, and that the girl was probably exaggerating for attention. My comment got downvoted to oblivion, and someone replied, "Found the boyfriend." The response got hundreds of upvotes and several awards. I deleted the app from my phone but couldn't stop thinking about it. Over the next few days, I noticed people looking at me differently around campus. Conversations would stop when I entered the dining hall. People would suddenly remember they had somewhere to be when I sat down near them. My friends started making excuses not to hang out. One of them, Richard, finally messaged me directly. "Dude, that Reddit post? Was that about you and Dee? Because if it was, you went way too far." I denied it, of course. Said it was all lies, that Dee was just bitter because I broke up with her. Richard didn't respond after that. Neither did most of my other friends when I reached out. My phone, once constantly buzzing with invites and messages, was eerily silent. Even Vanessa started acting weird. She canceled our plans twice in a row, claiming she was busy with work. Then I saw on her Instagram that she was hanging out with one of Dee's friends. The same night she told me she was too tired to see me. The betrayal felt personal, even though I'd never actually cared about Vanessa beyond what she could do for me. I was spiraling. I started drinking more, missing classes, showing up late to my shifts at the bookstore. My manager pulled me aside after I came in hungover for the third time in a week, my eyes bloodshot and my hands shaking as I tried to shelve books. "This isn't working out," he said. "We're going to have to let you go." He handed me my final paycheck, a pitiful amount that wouldn't even cover a week's worth of rent. Just like that, I lost my job. The job where I'd met Vanessa. Speaking of Vanessa, she ghosted me completely after that. Wouldn't answer my calls or texts. Then, about a week later, I saw on Instagram that she was dating one of Dee's close friends, a guy named Jordan, who I'd always been jealous of because Dee said he was one of the good ones. The photo showed them at a picnic, feeding each other strawberries, looking disgustingly happy. The caption under their picture together read, "Sometimes you have to date the wrong person to appreciate the right one. No more toxic people." I was furious, not just at Vanessa, but at Dee. In my twisted mind, I blamed her for everything that was happening to me. She was ruining my life, turning people against me. It never occurred to me that I was facing the consequences of my own actions, that the person I'd been for years was finally being seen clearly by everyone around me. In a moment of desperate rage, I wrote Dee a long email. I poured everything into it. How much I missed her, how sorry I was, how I'd change. I told her I was losing everything because of her vendetta against me. I begged her to call off the smear campaign and talk to me face to face. I wrote and rewrote it a dozen times, finally hitting send at 3 a.m. after too many shots of tequila. She never responded. But 3 days later, my phone rang. It was my dad. "We need to talk," he said, his voice unusually serious. "I got an email today." My heart sank. "From who?" "From Dee." I felt like I was going to throw up. "What did it say?" "It didn't say much," my dad replied, "but it showed a lot. Screenshots of your texts to her, a timeline of your relationship, pictures of the hickeys on your neck when you cheated, and one sentence, 'I just thought you should know what kind of man you raised.'" There was a long silence. I didn't know what to say. The weight of my actions, laid bare for my father to see, was suffocating. "Dad, she's exaggerating. She's trying to turn you against me. Stop." He cut me off. "Just stop. I've been thinking a lot since I got this email, about how I raised you, about the things I let you get away with, the entitlement I encouraged." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My dad had never spoken to me like this before. He'd always been my biggest defender, my safety net, the one who made problems disappear. "I failed you," he continued. "I thought I was helping you by giving you everything you wanted, but I was just creating a person who thinks the world owes him everything and owes nothing in return." "Dad, come on, I'm cutting you off," he said, though his voice held a note of pain I'd never heard before. "No more allowance, no more paying your rent, no more credit cards. If you want to live like an adult, you can pay like one." I was speechless. My dad had never denied me anything in my life, and now he was cutting me off completely? The ground seemed to shift beneath me. "You can't do that," I finally sputtered. "I'll flunk out. I'll be homeless. You'll figure it out," he said, "like everyone else has to. Maybe it's time you learned what real life is like." And he hung up. Just like that. My safety net. Gone. The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. I couldn't afford my apartment without my dad's money. I had to crash on a friend's couch, one of the few friends who still talked to me, and even he seemed reluctant. His apartment was small and cluttered, nothing like the spacious place I'd been living in. I tried to clear my name with a half-assed apology post on social media, saying I'd made mistakes, but was working on myself. I thought it sounded sincere. I was wrong. The comments were brutal. People called me out for not taking real responsibility, for making vague statements instead of specific apologies. Someone wrote, "Notice how he's only sorry now that everyone knows what he did?" Another commented, "Too little too late, dude." The post that I thought would rehabilitate my image only seemed to make things worse. Through all of this, Dee never said a word publicly. She didn't need to. Her silence was more powerful than anything she could have said. She just moved on with her life, surrounded by friends who supported her, while my life fell apart. Her absence spoke volumes. First, had to drop out of school. Couldn't afford the tuition without my dad. I got a job at a warehouse, loading trucks. The work was hard, the pay was poop, but it was all I could get without experience or references. My hands, once soft and manicured, became calloused and rough. I stopped drinking because I couldn't afford it anymore. My apartment was replaced by a room in a house with 4 other guys, all of us sharing one bathroom with perpetually damp towels and a shower that never got hot enough. But everywhere I went in that town, someone knew what I'd done. I'd walk into a bar and see people whispering. I'd match with someone on Tinder, and they'd unmatch as soon as they realized who I was. It was like I had a scarlet letter branded on my forehead. The shame followed me like a shadow. About 3 months after everything everything fell apart, I saw Dee at a cafe near campus. She was with a guy, the same one from the party. They were laughing, sharing a pastry. She looked happy, healthy. Her hair was different, shorter, with highlights. She'd changed her style too, wearing clothes I would have criticized before. She looked comfortable in her own skin in a way she never had with me. She didn't notice me, or maybe she did, but didn't care. I stood there watching them for a minute before leaving. That night, I deleted every photo, every message chain, every reminder of Dee from my phone and social media. It was time to accept that chapter was closed. I decided to move out of state. No big announcement, no dramatic goodbye. I just packed what little I owned into my car and drove. Found a small town where nobody knew me, got a job as a delivery driver, rented a tiny studio apartment with a view of a brick wall and a mattress on the floor. For the first time in my life, I was completely on my own. No dad to bail me out, no girlfriend to manipulate, no friends to impress, just me and the consequences of my actions. I'd like to say I had some immediate epiphany and became a better person overnight, but that's not how real life works. I was still selfish, still entitled, still blamed others for my problems, but I was learning, slowly and painfully, that the world doesn't revolve around me. About a year after I moved, I was scrolling through social media when I saw a flyer for a self-defense workshop, specifically for survivors of emotional absence. The workshop was happening in my old college town, and there, listed as one of the speakers, was Dee's name. Without really thinking about it, I requested the week off work. I drove back to my old town, checked into a cheap motel, and showed up at the community center where the workshop was being held. I sat in the back row, hood up, anonymous. When Dee walked onto the stage, I almost didn't recognize her. Not because she looked drastically different, but because of the way she carried herself. Confident, strong, at peace. She spoke clearly and calmly about her experience with emotional abuse, never naming me but describing our relationship in painful detail. The hardest part, she said to the room full of people, is recognizing that you deserve better, that what you're experiencing isn't love, it's control. And the second hardest part is walking away. As I listened to her speak, so articulate, so composed, so kind, despite everything, I finally understood something. Dee never needed revenge. She never needed to destroy me publicly or make me suffer. She just needed to live her life on her own terms, to be free of me. And watching her thrive without me was more powerful than any revenge could have been. After the workshop, people lined up to talk to her, to thank her for sharing her story. I slipped out before anyone could notice me. In the parking lot, I saw her again, hugging one of the attendees. The woman was crying, and Dee was comforting her with such genuine compassion. I got in my car and drove back to my new life, a life I was still figuring out how to live. I thought about reaching out to Dee, sending her a real apology, not for my benefit, but for hers. But I realized that the kindest thing I could do for her was to stay out of her life. She had healed, she had moved on, and maybe, if I worked hard enough on myself, someday I could too. I drove back to my new town with my head spinning. Seeing Dee like that, confident, helping others, completely moved on, hit me harder than I expected. The 6-hour drive gave me way too much time to think about everything, about who I was, about who I'd been, about who I could maybe become if I actually tried. When I got back to my crappy studio apartment, I crashed on my mattress and stared at the ceiling for hours. I kept replaying Dee's words in my head, the way she described emotional absence without a hint of bitterness. Just facts, just truth. I'd never really thought of myself as an abuser before. In my mind, I was just a guy who knew what he wanted, a guy who had standards. But hearing her lay it all out like that, I couldn't hide from it anymore. The next morning, I woke up to a text from my dad. First one in months. It just said, "How are you doing?" No lecture, no judgment, just checking in. I stared at those 4 words for like 20 minutes before responding. I almost typed, "I'm fine," out of habit, but instead I wrote, "Not great, but working on it." He called me right away. We talked for almost an hour. It was awkward at first, but then something weird happened. We actually had a real conversation. Not about money or about him fixing my problems, just about life, about how I was adjusting to being on my own, about how he was doing therapy to work through his grief over mom. Turns out, he'd been seeing someone for a few months now, trying to understand why he'd raised me the way he did. "I thought I was protecting you from pain," he said. "Instead, I just made sure you never learned how to handle it." I didn't know what to say to that. It was too real, too accurate. So I just said, "Yeah." After we hung up, I went to my delivery job. It was a Saturday, so tips were decent. I was delivering pizzas to this apartment complex when I saw this guy struggling to move a couch by himself. Normally I would have just walked past. Not my problem, right? But something made me stop. "Need a hand?" I asked. The guy looked relieved. Man, that would be amazing. My buddy bailed on me last minute, so I helped him move the couch up 3 flights of stairs. It was heavy as HL, and I was sweating through my shirt by the time we got it into his apartment. But it felt good to help someone without expecting anything in return. The guy offered me a beer afterward, and we ended up talking for a bit. His name was David. He'd just moved to town for a job at the local hospital. "You should come by the bar where I work sometimes," he said. "I bartend on weekends at the Rusty Nail. First drinks on me." I actually took him up on it the following weekend. The Rusty Nail was this dive bar with cheap beer and pool tables, nothing fancy. David introduced me to some of the regulars, and I ended up playing pool with this group of guys who worked at an auto shop nearby. They were cool, normal. They didn't know anything about my past, and I didn't volunteer the information. For the first time in forever, I was just hanging out with people without trying to impress them or control the situation. It was nice. Simple. I started going to the Rusty Nail pretty regularly. It became my spot. I'd help David close up sometimes, and in return, he'd let me drink for free after hours. One night, about 3 months after I saw Dee at that workshop, David asked me if I wanted to join their softball team. They were short a player for the season. I haven't played since elevated school, I warned him. Dude, we suck anyway, he laughed. We're in it for the beers afterward. So I joined the team. We were terrible, like embarrassingly bad, but it was fun. Every Sunday, we'd play a game, lose horribly, then go to someone's backyard for a BBQ. These people became my friends, real friends, not the kind who hung around because of my dad's money or because I manipulated them into staying. They liked me, the actual me, the me who was still figuring out who the HL I was. Around this time, I also started talking to my dad more regularly. He was still firm about not supporting me financially, but he'd call every week just to check in. One day, he mentioned that he'd run into Dee's parents at some charity event. They said she's doing well, he told me. She's finishing up her degree and got accepted to graduate school. I felt a weird mix of emotions hearing that. Part of me was jealous that she was moving forward while I was delivering pizzas and playing on a loser softball team. But another part, a part that was slowly growing, was genuinely happy for her. She deserved good things. That's great, I said, and I mostly meant it. My dad was quiet for a moment. You know, son, I've been thinking a lot about accountability lately, in my therapy sessions. Oh boy, here we go. I've never really apologized to you, he continued, for my part in all this. I thought I was being a good father by giving you everything, but I was just teaching you that you never had to consider others. That's on me. I didn't know how to respond to that. My dad had never apologized to me for anything before. It was always just money and gifts to make problems go away. I'm sorry too, I finally said, for being such a disappointment. You're not a disappointment, he said firmly. You're learning. We both are. Better late than never, right? After that conversation, something shifted. I started thinking more about accountability, about owning my SAT instead of blaming everyone else. I thought about reaching out to Dee to apologize, but every time I drafted a message, it felt selfish, like I was just trying to make myself feel better. So I never sent anything. Some wounds are better left alone. Instead, I focused on making small changes. I picked up extra shifts at work, started saving money, took a community college class in business management. It wasn't glamorous, but it was honest. And for once in my life, I was earning everything I got. About 6 months after seeing Dee at that workshop, I was delivering a pizza to this office building downtown. As I was walking out, I literally bumped into someone coming in. The pizza box went flying, and I scrambled to catch it before it hit the ground. I'm so sorry, a female voice said. I looked up, and my heart stopped. It was Vanessa. She looked exactly the same, except her hair was shorter now. She recognized me immediately, and her face did this weird thing where it couldn't decide between a smile and a grimace. Oh, she said. Hi. Hey, I replied, suddenly very aware of my delivery uniform and the pizza box in my hands. There was an awkward silence. The last time I'd seen her, she was dating one of Dee's friends, and had basically ghosted me after the Reddit post went viral. How are you? She finally asked, clearly uncomfortable. I'm okay, I said. Different, but okay. You? Good. I'm good. I'm actually working here now. She gestured to the building. Marketing department. That's great, I said, and I meant it. You always talked about wanting to do that. She nodded, looking surprised that I remembered. Yeah, it's a good job. Listen, I should probably… Yeah, me too, I said quickly. I've got more deliveries. As I turned to leave, she called after me. Hey, for what it's worth, I'm sorry about how everything went down. With us, I mean. It wasn't cool how I just disappeared. I could have been bitter. Could have thrown it in her face how she jumped ship the moment things got tough. But what would be the point? It's all good, I said instead. Water under the bridge. She smiled, relieved. Take care of yourself, okay? You too, Vanessa. I walked back to my delivery car feeling weirdly light. That interaction could have been a disaster, but it wasn't. It was just two people acknowledging the past and moving on. No drama, no manipulation, just adulthood. That night, I did something I'd been putting off for months. I called Richard, one of my old friends from college who'd cut me off after the Reddit post. He didn't answer, so I left a voicemail. Hey man, it's me. I know it's been a while, and you probably don't want to hear from me, but I just wanted to say, I'm sorry for how I acted back then. You were right to call me out. Anyway, that's it. Hope you're doing well. I didn't expect him to call back, but he did, a few days later. The conversation was stiff at first, but gradually warmed up. He told me he was in law school now. I told him about my delivery job and community college class. We didn't talk about Dee or the past much, just caught up like old friends do. Before we hung up, he said something that stuck with me. You sound different, man. Less, I don't know, less like you're trying to be someone you're not. I thought about that a lot in the weeks that followed. Was I different? I still had my moments of entitlement and selfishness. I still caught myself thinking the world owed me something sometimes. But maybe I was changing, little by little. Almost exactly a year after seeing Dee at that workshop, I got a promotion at work. Assistant manager. Nothing fancy, but it came with a small raise and regular hours. I could finally afford a slightly better apartment, one with actual separate rooms and a view of something other than a brick wall. On moving day, David and some of the guys from the softball team helped me move my stuff. We were carrying my couch. I had a real couch now, not just a mattress on the floor, up to my new place when David nudged me. Dude, is that your ex or something? She's been watching us for like 5 minutes. I turned around, and there she was, Dee, standing on the sidewalk, looking right at me. My heart did a weird flip in my chest. She looked good, healthy. Her hair was even shorter now, pixie cut style. She was wearing a graduate school sweatshirt and jeans. I told the guys to go ahead without me and walked over to her. Up close, I could see she had new freckles across her nose, probably from spending time in the sun. "Hey," I said, suddenly nervous. "This is unexpected." "Yeah," she agreed. "I'm visiting my parents for the weekend. They still live in the neighborhood. I was just taking a walk and saw you and..." She trailed off, shrugging. "How are you?" I asked, genuinely wanting to know. "I'm good," she said. "Really good, actually. I'm in graduate school now. Psychology." "That's awesome," I said. "You always wanted to do that." She looked surprised that I remembered. "Yeah, I did." She glanced at the moving truck. "You're moving?" "Just to a better apartment," I explained. "Got promoted at work." She nodded, and there was an awkward silence. I had so many things I wanted to say to her, but none of them seemed right. Sorry felt too small. Explanations felt too self-serving. "I saw you," I finally said, "at that workshop last year. I was in the back. I didn't want to bother you." Her eyes widened slightly. "You were there?" "Yeah. You were really good, really helpful to those people." She studied my face, like she was trying to figure out if I was being sincere. "Thanks," she said finally. Another silence fell between us. There was so much history there, so much pain I'd caused. It felt impossible to bridge that gap with small talk. "I should let you get back to moving," she said, taking a step back. "Yeah, I should." I gestured vaguely toward the apartment building. She turned to go, then stopped. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course. Are you happy?" "Now, I thought about it. About my small apartment and my modest job. About my softball team and my new friends who knew nothing about my past. About my weekly calls with my dad, where we actually talked, instead of him just solving my problems with money. "I'm getting there," I answered honestly. "It's a work in progress." She nodded, a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "Good, that's good." As she walked away, I had this urge to call after her, to ask for another chance, or at least for forgiveness, but I didn't. Some chapters need to stay closed. Some lessons need to be learned the hard way. I went back to moving into my new apartment with my new friends. Later that night, as we all sat around drinking beers and eating pizza, I looked around at these people who accepted me as I was now, not as the person I used to be. And for the first time in a long time, I felt something close to contentment. I still think about Dee sometimes, about the lessons she taught me, intentionally or not, about how sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's just moving on and living well. I hope she's out there doing exactly that, and I hope that one day I can say I truly learned from my mistakes, that I became someone worthy of the second chance I got, not for her, for me.